Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zainul. I'm from the School of Chemical and Energy Engineering, UTM, under the Faculty of Engineering, and I'll be your moderator today for this session by our distinguished speaker under the 29 Distinguished Lecture Series organized by UTM Engineering. So we have today with us, all the way from the Netherlands, from the Delft, Professor Piet. So he is actually we met before a couple of times, a number of times in various conferences, mostly in India and China. Maybe just to share a little bit, in 2018, last time we had a visit by one of Piet's colleague from UNESCO-IHE in Delft. So he was here as a visiting researcher. And during his time, he managed to deliver some, give some publication talk and sharing with our postgraduate students, which was warmly received by our students. Around 200 PACs was, the session was attended by 200 PACs. So yeah, today we are very fortunate and grateful that an esteemed researcher such as Piet would be sharing his expertise, his knowledge, his experience with us today. And maybe Piet, later on, maybe we can, I can maybe share something that in UTM also we have a dedicated center, research center that focus on water study. It is called IPASA, IPASA. And we also have a dedicated center that cater or takes care of the sustainable aspect of the university. It is called as UTM Center for Sustainability. Yeah, so hopefully UTM and UNESCO-IHE can have more collaborations after this. And without further delay, I think I just hand over the session to our Dean, Professor Rafiq. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you, Zainul. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to our 29th UTM Engineering Distinguished Lecture Series. My name is Muhammad Rafiq and I am the Dean of Engineering, University Technology Malaysia. Today, it is my utmost pleasure to welcome Professor Piet from UNESCO-IHE Delft, the Netherlands. A bit about our presenter today. Professor Dr. Engineer Lens is established Professor of New Energy Technologies at National University Ireland Galway. He is also Professor of Environmental Biotechnology at UNESCO-IHE Delft, the Netherlands, adjunct Professor at Tampere University of Technology, Finland, and was previously on the faculty of the Sub-Department of Environmental Technology at Wageningen University from 1999 to 2006, where he still has a 0 nomination. Prof. Lens trained in environmental sanitation, then obtained his Ph.D. in environmental engineering at University Gent, Belgium. He is founding editor-in-chief of the review journal Reviews in Environmental Science and Biotechnology, and founding editor of the IWA Publishing series Integrated Environmental Technology. He is the initiator of the Marie Curie Training Site, Sulfur and Metals, HEMEP, the Erasmus Mundus Joint Doctoral Program, Environmental Technologies for Contaminated Soils, Sediments and Solid Waste, ETECOS, the Marie Sklodowska-Curie European Joint Degree Advanced Biological Waste to Energy Technologies, the Erasmus Mundus Master Course, International Master of Science in Environmental Technology, and joined MSc degree programs with the Asian Institute of Technology, Bangkok, and University of Valle, Cali, Colombia. Besides innovative research, he is also a leader in education and capacity building, organizing numerous study days, conferences, summer schools, and short courses. He has co-authored over 550 scientific publications and edited 10 book volumes. So that is a biography of our speaker. Here now is Professor Piet from UNESCO-IHE Delft, the Netherlands, on a topic, biological waste treatment processes in support of a circular economy. Professor Piet, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Rafiq and Zainul. It's a pleasure for me to give this lecture in your series. And I will give you some examples of how we can use biological waste treatment processes to go away from end-of-pipe treatment and treating waste as something which is to be disposed of, how we can use biological processes to utilize those compounds present in the waste, and like that move towards a circular economy. I hope that the sound is fine. If there are any problems with the sound, please indicate it to me, then I can adjust the microphone. I will give you a little background of what we are doing in Delft, and then I will give you small examples of application areas in the energy sector, in the mining sector, and in wastewater reuse applications. About the background, so we are looking at a focus of sustainability in all the research and the technologies that we develop. And the very first important aspect is to make a cleaner production, to see if we have a production process, can we not avoid waste rather than clean it up later on. This is so important that each time I give a lecture, I still stress that, please, if you do not pollute, you do not need to clean it up. It's very simple, like at home, but for big factories, this is sometimes involving a lot of changes in the production process that maybe are not so easy, but at the end, for the environment, it can give a lot of benefits. But whatever you do, you will always have some waste, and then we look at the where can we recover the resources. So that's then the red box, and in order to do that, we look at eco-technologies, the yellow box. So which technologies can we use that are as environmental friendly as possible to recover resources from waste? So we don't consider so much the strong chemical, physical pre-treatments, for instance, like radiation, or using strong chemicals. We try to develop as eco-friendly as possible the processes. So that's a bit the background on the philosophy, how we treat the wastes, and to implement there the resource recovery for a circular economy. I had a pleasure to work a lot with IWA Publishing, and many of the work we did, we captured in the book that were just mentioned, and we have centered the research around three main challenges for society, being energy, wastewater treatment and reuse in the cities, but also the farms of the future, and then the mining. And I will give you examples of all three domains within the 30 minutes of this lecture. We can discuss many more aspects, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me by email or in another way. Maybe later on, when there is again possibility to meet in Malaysia, like Zanul mentioned, in cooperation with the water center they have there and sustainability center. But I just want to show you a couple of examples of these biological driven processes that we can use to recycle and reintegrate waste into the production processes. The first one is the waste to energy, and it's a quite well-known anaerobic digestion. Here you see some of the points we were and are studying. In the right bottom, you see anaerobic digestion of rice straw, where a farmer just took the bales they come from the farmland, from the rice, from paddy cultivation. He's just capping that, making it anaerobic. And we were looking with a dry anaerobic digestion, how much methane can we recover from that? It is quite interesting, but depending on the conditions of energy prices, and methane is not the most expensive, is not so, it's difficult to distribute. It is not that expensive. So to make a business case for this is possible, but it depends a bit on the local energy conditions. Within this process, we also have residues, liquid residues and solid residues. For the liquid residues, I go to the left of the slide where you see this algae. So there in a photobioreactor, when you couple this anaerobic digestion process with the liquid stream, which has a lot of nitrogen and phosphorus, and there you can cultivate algae. Again, this can be simple biomass production that you feed as well in the anaerobic digestion, or there we have a possibility to also cultivate higher value added products with the algae, or even pharmaceuticals or nutritionals that give a much higher price, and like that make the process economics more advantageous, and like that we can get the waste treatment out of this end of pipe approach, and we can integrate it with the production of new compounds, fine chemicals that can be used in society, and like that make the processes integrated in the production chain of a country or of a region. For the solid part of the residue of the anaerobic digestion, I go to the top of the slide where biochar. You see PhD student who was looking at biochar production from organic waste or from the solid digestate from anaerobic digesters. And then we were looking, well, can we remove heavy metals? Is it a biosorbent? Can we use it to upgrade the soil quality? Because soil organic matter is a big issue. So what would be the agricultural advantage of bringing this biochar on an agricultural field? And it's very, very interesting. And there are a lot of possibilities for that. I move through a few of the slides now because a couple of the slides are quite well known. It's the basic of anaerobic digestion. In this slide, you see the philosophy. As I was saying, we look, can we move towards a circular economy with bio-based processes? Well, yes, we can move from the refinery with petroleum-based to exactly the same compounds and maybe even more with biomass that comes from the agricultural fields as residues. So that's important. We don't compete with the food, but we just use the residues that are available on the land. And this is classical anaerobic digestion, where I just want to remind you that although I say it's very interesting and easy, please be reminded that there is several steps involved in this process. And nowadays we are also looking more and more, maybe can we not go even here, hydrolysis and directly capture the amino acids or the fatty acids as oligomers or even monomers, rather than go the full route like we know so well with this anaerobic digestion with the methanogens or with mixed population. So maybe we can, by studying this anaerobic digestion food web, we can, if we have the right separation techniques, go upfront in this anaerobic digestion, and then we'll go more to industrial biotechnology, where either we try to get out this rather big molecules, or we can go a step further. Maybe we try to separate the lactic acid and we make PLA, polylactic acid plastics from that, or we try to get out the ethanol for car fuel, for instance, VFA, for many industrial processes, rather than to stick to the classical view where we produce methane out of the anaerobic, out of the organic matter. A big item for this is the fact that many of the substrates I was mentioning, this waste organic matter from agriculture, it has the lignin that is gluing together the cellulose and the hemicellulose. For many of the processes, we mainly use this carbohydrate, cellulose, hemicellulose, and the lignin has to be removed. So we study a lot on the how can we pre-treat the organic matter. in order to remove this lignin. We have a lot of lignin then left. Can we not do something with that as well? Yes, there are now also a lot of studies on applications for also lignin use in, for instance, development of inks, or even in support of road construction. So there are a lot of possibilities that we can integrate by designing the different food webs in anaerobic digestion, and like that make use of the materials, the compounds that are present in the biomass, and have a higher value of the waste rather than just to degrade them to methane. Here you see a few examples of bacteria, just to remind you that these are then this is the scale we are talking about for bioconversion. So these little bacteria, how do they get access to these big, large structures from the organic substrate? So there we come with the engineering approaches. And it's good not to forget that, well, the bacteria that we want, they need to be in contact with the substrates in order to have a good conversion. We know a lot of the pathways. Here I show you the acetate pathway. This is the methanol pathway, again, to remind you about the microorganisms. So it's really very interesting to look at the biochemistry also of these methanogens. We know a lot of it, and by knowing that, we can design and make use of the methane produced, our shift towards other products. And to remind you, well, biogas, there is a lot of applications, either direct to use it directly, or to convert it to hydrogen, or to enrich and use it as a car fuel, or as other energy uses, also hydrogen we can use in different applications. So here you see again the scheme I showed you, where we are looking, well, bioenergy methane. This is what we talk usually about when we think about anaerobic digestion, but here you see that many other compounds on this line can be captured, can be produced with the anaerobic digestion process. I mentioned the pre-treatment to remove the lignin and to get the more access to this monomer, so to do these complex materials to produce monomers from that, are other compounds. The key is in this at the moment, the most difficult where we are is, what can we do in terms of downstream processing, and how can we upgrade, how can we purify the gaseous compounds or the organic compounds that we are interested in to make use of them. I want to give you one example of that, like the lactic acid to produce from waste. And it was a PhD student. Actually, the idea was that we can make this lactic acid from, for instance, sauerkraut. And this person thought, well, why not integrate that also in the toilet system? So it was a PhD student who was studying urine diverting toilets. So you have a fraction where is the feces and the urine. And we were considering, well, why not make a lactic acid fermentation here instead of having the foul odors in the toilets. And this was a very interesting idea. So each time after the toilet use, in this pilot experiment, this sauerkraut, so lactic acid bacteria, were added to the compartments. Also urine is very easy, relatively easy to ferment, and we got very good results in terms of agricultural application. Germination tests show that tomato, for instance, can germinate when fertilized with lactic acid fermented urine, in contrast to just urine that is stored and where you have the anaerobic digestion of ureum that I showed you. That scheme where you get a lot of VFA formed and ammonium that gives you a lot of bad smell. Also, it can give rise to an increase in the soil organic matter, as you see in the left the top left picture, where soil can be really enriched if you add that to the horizon, to the soil. There's really enrichment of organic matter. The black color shows that, and like that we can improve the soil quality of region by integrating this lactic acid fermentation, in this case in sanitation, and make a link to agriculture. Of course, there is a big remark here. If we go from human toilet products like urine and feces, and we bring that in agriculture, of course, there is a lot to say about that. In public acceptance, it's also public health. So I'm not saying here now that you should do that straight away, but we showed the proof of principle, and in some cases this can be considered. But of course, for this would be a kind of more exceptional case. But there are possibilities to do this. One, because it's very natural. You add a sauerkraut after toilet use, you don't get the smells, and it could give you some possibilities to integrate, for instance, in other applications. Like here, this is a school in Kerala, India, where a reactor has been implemented. Sorry, anaerobic digester has been implemented. Here you see the anaerobic digester in the in a container, which is here, and these are the toilets at the school. So the kids, they love it because they have a nice place to go to the toilet. The wastewater goes into the anaerobic digester, and then there we could have the lactic acid fermentation instead of the methane. And for instance, here in the effluent liquid phase, where is nitrogen and phosphorus that is rich, we can grow their crops. Of course, not to eat because it's toilet water, but it could be, for instance, ornamental flowers or potato, for instance, that that we don't eat, but that have a lot of starch, and that can be integrated into a biorefinery approach. So this is just one of the many different options that we have if we start to consider how can we make waste processing an integral part of a circular economy. And that can then be with agricultural crops where we grow high value added compounds, or try to cultivate to produce highly added value compounds from the waste, or in sanitation, where also there we integrate the daily needs that we have as human beings, and we can try to find ways how to integrate that with production of useful compounds or nice compounds. Of course, as we see now also in the current situation with the COVID, if we talk about sanitation and human excreta, we have to be very careful on, don't we create any dangers for pathogens or for infections. But if we are aware of that and we design a good system, this can really be a viable option. So this is about organics, organic solid waste, mainly from the agricultural sector, or maybe also sanitation sector. There is another sector, which is the mining sector, where there's also a lot of possibilities for bacteria to produce useful compounds that we have not yet considered so much. So here I first take this slide, which I showed you, and we all are quite aware about, definitely for methane, also biohydrogen production, but also these LCFA, VFA, bioplastics we all know about, again, so mainly organic compounds, but there is also quite considerable fraction that are the nutrients, but also the metals. And we have been very interested in, can we not make nanomaterials from this type of inorganic fraction from the waste. Maybe I just continue. We have had here a back cover in this journal, Environmental Science Nano, where we show, well, our view is that there is a lot of waste and it could be toxic, hazardous, but with this anaerobic digester here, with the processes that we know so well in anaerobic digester, we can also go away from this dangerous and quite sterile approach. No, we can also make interesting and useful compounds with this processes that happen here, and it can be nanoparticles. One of the many of the nanoparticles we studied is elemental selenium, cadmium selenide, cadmium telluride, but also zinc selenide, zinc telluride, indium telluride. So we come to nanoparticles that are, for instance, used in imaging, in medical applications. Again, waste to medical applications, we have to be careful, but in principle it's possible. But there are also other applications, like for instance, the photovoltaic cells, they use this cadmium telluride. So we could make out of this waste streams, if there is tellurium or if there is cadmium, usually cadmium, like arsine, there is so much problems on what do we do with this waste. Well, if we rethink the way we are working, we can integrate bioreactors and produce useful compounds that so far we did not consider much. And we can, like that, close loops, close cycles, and have a circular economy. So here you see one bacterium. It's a Pseudomonas, so it's not so uncommon bacteria, Pseudomonas, and then it forms this red cells here. Sorry, red sphere. So this is a Pseudomonas cell, a bacterium again. So we are talking about bacterial processes. And at the outside of the bacterium, nanoparticles are formed, where we can harvest them. Or another advantage is so nanoparticle. Well, in principle, they are, as you see here, this is 1 micrometer, so they would be here about 200 nanometers. So strictly speaking, is a bit too big for a nanoparticle, but still very, very difficult to retain. But because they are fixed to a 1 micrometer cell, they are more easy to retain, and we can use ultrafiltration rather than nanofiltration to retain the nanoparticles. So the philosophy we have is that we try to avoid mining where people are sometimes in very bad conditions taking out the metals, where we go to biomining. As you see here, this is heap leaching. Water is spread over chalcopyrite. And here you see the blue color of the copper. It has 1 gram per liter copper, which is then flowing to the factory. And there the liquid is processed and the copper is recovered, while the mining is being done with microorganisms. So no people are involved. And this is an alternative process that we call biomining, where it is more ethical to mine. But of course, sometimes, depending on the conditions, it is very efficient, or it can be also extensive, and then it is not that efficient. So we have to be a bit careful about the process economics, but in theory there is no problem to have that process working. If we think about what can we do, how can we process that, what can we process, what ores can we process. So that would be for this process here, the bioleaching would be, for instance, for waste material, waste ores that have little content, like for instance in lead. If the ores have less than 5%, they are not so processed anymore. But in the past, and even in the past, some factories dumped lead residues with 5% or 1% of lead. For bioleaching, this is very, very interesting because it's too expensive to process, but still you can squeeze out a little bit more of the valuable compound that we would like to use. But another source we are talking nowadays is the e-waste, electronic waste. Here you see the printed circuit boards, and you might know, maybe, I don't know, about Malaysia. This is India. So there, these waste telephones are cooked literally in cyanide, and the gold is capturing, is sequestered by the cyanide, and it can be easily recovered from such a cooking device, and then it can be sold. So it gives some extra money to the people who do that. But yeah, here we see the health impact is terrible. So we have to be very careful not to stimulate this type of resource recovery. But in principle, these electronic wastes are also very, very important source for the future, because, well, it has a lot of gold in zero valent state, so much better than the ores that are mined. But there are also many other metals that maybe we are not even considering yet, like the rare earth elements. Many of these are used, for instance, in the displays, touchscreens. There we can recover those elements from these wastes and with bacteria. I show you one example of, again, a Pseudomonas, in this time fluorescens and aeruginosa, and these strains were taken from soil where bacteria, so some of these bacteria develop the capability to degrade, to produce cyanide spontaneously. So we do not add it from glycerin, but these microorganisms produce the cyanide out of their metabolism in order to, it's kind of chemical warfare along so it kills its competitors like that. And of course, if we are considering to add cyanide here as a chemical, maybe we can consider to use the bacteria to produce the cyanide, and like that have a less harmful process. And we show that it is indeed possible to do that. We have a paper we published about this method, and we could recover like that the gold in a two-step process. So we cannot, if you do directly on the printed circuit board like here, your yield will be rather low, because the cyanide reacts with all the other metals in the printed circuit board. So if you do first step with acidotheobacillus and you lower the pH, all the base metals go out, and then with the cyanide we can recover the gold in a second step. So two-step process. It's very promising. I showed you already this scheme where we were considering, well, what can we do to take out fatty acids, lactate, ethanol, hydrogen as compounds that are more valuable maybe than the methane. Well, if there is sulfate, there will be sulfide production, and that sulfide we can use to produce metal sulfides, which can then be precipitating, and we can have them recovered. So this would be then the next step. So in the first step, we release the metals, like in the copper. Here in this, we release the metals. Here is 1 gram per liter of copper, and then we need this step 3, the downstream processing. For that, we can again use bacteria, sulfate-reducing bacteria, that are then able to, or that produce sulfide within biofilms, and we can use it then for having removal of zinc, in this case, for instance, as nice crystals, and to recover it. So here you see principle can be even selective precipitation, as you see, depending on the sulfide concentration and the metals and the sulfide concentration. So here you see that first it is case, the squares are copper. So in this case, first copper is completely removed, and then only when the copper is removed, we can remove the zinc. So there are possibilities for selective separation of the different metals. We have applied that. Here you see a full-scale sulfate-reducing reactor in the Netherlands. So here hydrogen is blown in, and then sulfate reducers produce the zinc sulfide that we can recover. I will skip that. So here just want to show you that we bring in hydrogen in this big reactor, and then sulfate reducer bacteria produce the H2S, and then we get the zinc sulfide precipitation. And so this is applied at full scale in this plant. How do we get the hydrogen? Well, one possibility can be to produce it from methane. I don't have the time to go back to the slides, but there is in one of the slides I showed you the methane, the hydrogen is produced from methane. But we can also look to other very interesting bacteria. So its title is Biological Processes for Circular Economy. Here we go to the deep sea, where we see a very, very interesting combinations of archaea in red and sulfate-reducing bacteria in green. So we have these agglomerates where bacteria and archaea together reduce the sulfate, and with methane as electron donor, and like that we can also use to precipitate the heavy metals. I want to finish with one example on water reuse and nature-based solutions. So the third challenge we are facing, so I talked a lot on waste to energy, green mining. I gave you these examples of nanoparticles, of recovering, for instance, gold with bioleaching, or base metals with sulfidic precipitation. What about water reuse? Well, here you see some examples. We can reuse the water in gray water, for instance, in these green walls. In some cities, this is very much promoted to have, for the greening effect, to have green walls. We also have worked on constructed wet roofs, so to have the wetland on top of the building rather than using extra space. There is not so much known about these wetlands and natural treatment systems, so we worked also quite a lot on modeling of these constructed wetlands in order to predict their prediction with a combination of the biokinetics, so biological, what are the bacteria doing, then with the water flow through this porous media. The idea that we have with this is, well, to integrate what the first part of the lecture, can we have activity of a family, and can that be integrated in an ecological farm? So the family has excreta, we have issues with hygiene. Also the cattle has manure, we also have issues with hygiene. If we consider that we can overcome that, we can do the anaerobic digestion. The biogas is used for cooking by the family or heating if needed. And the effluent, it can go in a pond. So I showed you the example of nitrogen with used for algae growth. We can also have the nitrogen and the phosphorus used for duckweed growth, where then fish grow. And it can give food to the family, and also the water can then go further. What is not used here by the fish and the duckweed, it can be used for integrating of the crops that can be either eaten by the family or by the cattle. So it is a very interesting concept that we would like to have in place. Big issue is, if we go in this closed cycle circular economy at a very small level at the farm scale, then we have issues of One Health. So what about the health? What about circulation of pathogens? What about cross contamination between the cattle and the family both ways. So that's then an issue at farm level. If we go in a mega city like Kuala Lumpur, how can you apply this concept? Is it still possible in urban farm? Or so there it is completely disconnected. So that are then the challenges. So at a bigger scale, there, how do we arrange the flows in the circular economy? That requires really well thinking. What I have hoped to show you is that there are a lot of biological conversions with microorganisms that we can convert waste, both organic and inorganic, into feedstocks, into compound starting material of production processes, and that we can make use for many processes that feed into the society to make the society more circular, less waste, and more reuse, so that we don't have to take new feedstock to prepare each time that we want to make a compound. So what we are, for that, we need good technologies, and that is what we are developing in IHE Delft, but in many other laboratories around the world on environmental biotechnology. It is a very interesting search for these processes where we have a combination of chemistry, bioavailability, physics, thermodynamics, process conditions, and biology, the kinetics and the bacteria. And together, all this bringing together, we look at the processes and we can make innovations in the processes in order to make the reuse of certain compounds possible, so that we have a circular economy in place. And this is work in progress. We achieved already a lot is possible. And I look forward to implementation of many of these processes in the coming years. The time is very timely for that. There is a lot of attention to this, and actually society is waiting for this type of processes. So where possible, we would like to move from the laboratory scale, pilot scale, into more implementation of some of these technologies. So with this, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, Piet.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So for that very interesting sharing, it does bring a lot of memories back, especially on the bioleaching part. All right, because last time I also worked with some bioleaching work with pyrite.
Okay.
From a gold mine in Malaysia last time. So can we take some questions from the audience?
Sure. You're welcome. Shall
maybe,
I stop sharing the screen, or?
It is okay as it is now. It's okay. So we do have some questions from the audience, which was asked from through the FB page.
Okay.
All right. You can also see the questions. If I may read it, this is questions from Professor Fadil Maddin from UTM. He is actually the one who heads the Center for Sustainability in UTM.
Okay.
So his question is it possible to produce the high rate of hydrogen and methane is no doubt discovered from modifications of reactor? So what are the recommendations for future-ready renewable energy? Okay, what are the recommendations for future renewable energy, especially from urban as well as non-urban and designated for remote areas? That's number one. Number two, what are the greatest challenges in the integration of circular economy and societal impact for it to be more practical? Yeah, please speak.
Yep. Okay, so for the first question about hydrogen and methane. So hydrogen is very interesting, and according to some prognosis, it will be very much important in the coming years. But we can only produce relative little amount of hydrogen from organic waste. So even if you focus only on hydrogen, you might leave a lot of still opportunities for other recovery of other compounds that are not formed from hydrogen. So mostly the hydrogen is formed from the carbohydrates, and about 4 mole per mole of glucose is already very good, but in reality we have only half of that, or even only 25% of that. And there is a lot of attention to get really towards these 4 moles, but usually it's very difficult to get at. There are 2 ways, if you are allowed to produce, there are 2 ways to overcome or to deal with that. If you're allowed to have also anaerobic digestion, you can also produce methane, and then you don't sell the hydrogen, but you sell hightane. So it's hydrogen and methane together, and many engines can work with this combination of both hydrogen and methane. So if you have applications, for instance, for trucks in a domestic area, you could allow to have also the hydrogen in produced and to co-produce it. So first focus on the hydrogen production, then the methane, and bring them together for the application. Also, for instance, for lightning gas, methane gas with a little hydrogen blended is no problem. Another way, if you still want to maximize hydrogen, you have to, so I was now referring to dark fermentation, but then you can still combine it with photofermentation. So this dark fermentation effluent have a lot of acetate. That acetate can be used by some photosynthetic bacteria or other phototrophs, and they convert the acetate also to hydrogen. And like that, in the second reactor, you can increase your hydrogen yield, and like that have more hydrogen for, if that is the real desired end product, for instance, for industry. To be honest, I think that from organic waste, the yields will be relatively low, but okay, it's a start. If you consider it, and there are definitely ways to optimize it, but then maybe the process economics, because of the several reactor types that you need, can become too negative, because you need also investment for the 2 reactors.
Piet, sorry, Piet.
Yes. Yeah.
I was informed by the administrator for you to switch off your PowerPoint.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because now everybody can see you, but you cannot see our page.
That's right. I cannot see it. I put stop sharing.
Stop sharing.
Yeah. Like this. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So.
Yeah, please, with the second question, yes.
Yeah. And what was the second? What was the second question? I'm sorry.
It's about
circular economy. Yeah. Okay. What are the
integration of circular economy and the greatest challenge? Integrate circular economy and societal impact. Yeah, I think technologically we are there. We have a lot of possibilities technologically. So I only showed a few. I highlighted only a few examples. So there is really a lot possible. The big challenge is to have it accepted. So social acceptance by the public. I gave several examples for integration of sanitation in circular economy. There we have really a big issue on the health aspect. If fecal matter is contaminated, it is really a challenge to overcome that. So we should find ways to be sure that there is really a block of the contamination that can be extremely acid pH, but maybe people don't believe that. Maybe burning, but that's then maybe destroying a lot of the possibilities. So that's really a challenge to overcome, social acceptance. And another challenge to overcome is maybe that industry, they are used to produce their products from feedstock with processes that work, and then innovation to go away from
processes that they know that work to an unknown process that maybe destroys their business. That's a second challenge, again, more in the social or in the production process. So not really technical, but more societal or behavior aspect, because we cannot have that. The companies, they need to trust the technology options that we offer. So that's another challenge. So we can demonstrate it in the lab in pilot scale, but then the step towards full-scale implementation is also a big challenge.
Okay, thank you for that one, Piet. Do we have any more questions from the participants, from the audience, maybe? Because if we still trying to get it, I have a couple questions for you, Piet.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I was very interested with your slide showing the bioheap leaching work.
Yeah.
Yeah, your bioheap leaching work of copper, right?
Yeah.
That was in Africa or India?
Chile, actually. So in Chile, there are, it's done quite on a large scale. There are kilometers of this type of heap leaching, where they leave it very extensively. They just have the chalcopyrite in heaps for kilometers long, and then they have the channels that go to the factory. So that's very extensive. So they rely on the rainfall. Apparently the weather conditions in terms of storms and rain are favorable to allow that. In many other parts of the world, then this process would still be accelerated. So on a smaller scale, some plant where then also the water is led through the pile in order to accelerate. So then there is an artificial watering for the bacteria to keep them alive and to stimulate the production of the sulfuric acid. And that's this type of approach that's all around the world. Africa, Europe, Finland, UK. So many areas apply these processes.
My follow-up question to that one, Piet, is actually when you carry out the bioleaching process over there, does that involve non-technical contribution? For example, did you and your team have some sort of capacity building for local people? Do you have some engagement with the school children over there? Maybe you do some demonstration to the school kids and stuff like that?
Yeah, no. So I'm sorry, not for that case. So that was the case with the toilet systems and this anaerobic digester in the container that I showed you.
Yeah.
So that was on wastewater reuse with growing of crops along in the tubes along the container. There was a really big outreach to the kids, and they loved it. They loved both the toilet system that they could flush, and also the flowers that were growing attracted a lot of attention. And then you can go into the classroom and make them aware also about in sanitation, about hygiene aspects. So that was really very good opportunity for industry. And this bioleaching, we have not done that so much. One, we did not really have good projects that allow that, but the other is the mining companies. They have, like I was saying, what is the big challenge for the circular economy? Well, it's company behavior. So these companies know how the processes work. They have an ongoing process train, and to change that is very difficult. So then you would really need to have a project with them or collaboration, and they should be willing to change their way of operation. So, but very often this is because they are forced by the governments or by local people because of environmental impacts. So thank you for the good suggestion. Would be very good to do that, but you need to enter. So you need to start a dialogue, and it is not always that easy.
Yeah, actually, we in UTM, we have a dedicated center that do this. It's
Okay.
called Center for Community and Industry Network. So the
Okay.
target for this center is actually to bring UTM's technology to the community outside or the industry
Okay.
outside, with the target of number one, to technology transfer. Number two is to ensure that we can benefit beyond the targeted initial community or industry just now. So that goes up to the school children, to the household. Yeah. So I'm thinking whether in your work, you have done something like that also. Yeah, it's okay, Piet. So
just to add to that, what we are now doing is to write policy briefs. So also to try to disseminate that message to policymakers. We realize that actually also policy, people in the parliaments and people around there making the laws or debating about issues in the, whatever, I don't know what you have in Malaysia for units, can be also on a local level, in a regional level, I mean, in the local city councils. So these people are also we realize that also those people have rather limited knowledge, and education is sometimes too general to really know the nitty-gritties. And in order to support their knowledge, we are making easily accessible information for policy development, to have evidence-based policy.
Yeah, Piet, that's a very similar thing that we have in Malaysia actually. So some of our researchers already engage the community and industry out there. They also sometimes go towards this channel, all right, to ensure that this can be properly implemented. Okay, Piet, I think we already come to the 57th minute of our session, so we are left with 3 minutes. Yeah. So for the last 3 minutes, may I pass the session back to Professor Rafiq to do some wrapping up. Yeah. Thank you very much, Piet.
Zainul, thank you so very much for chairing the session, and also for introducing Professor Piet Lens to me. And to Professor Piet Lens, thank you so very much. It is certainly an honor to have a professor at UNESCO-IHE in our program. And you talked about policy related to environment, sustainability. This is an important issue here in Malaysia, and it is interesting to have someone who is involved directly with developing policy briefs, and then presented to the policy makers around the globe. So I hope that Zainul, you can continue your collaboration with Professor Piet Lens. Yeah. Again, thank you so very much to both of you, and to all of you watching this webinar live all around the globe. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned, because we have many more distinguished lecture series in the future. Until then, bye for now. Bye-bye.
Okay, with pleasure. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you very much, Piet. Thank you, Prof.